This episode of the Multiracialverse podcast is brought to you by Evitan Couture, a brand born from a powerful vision and a deep connection to heritage. Founded by Shinnecock brothers Jason Tech King and Wayan Moon Smith, Evitan represents resilience and pride. From handmade tie-dye to wellness-focused athletic wear, each piece is crafted with intention and positivity, smudged with sage for good vibes, and delivered to you with love. Join the Evitan family on their journey of empowerment and inspiration. Hit up Moon on Instagram at Evitan_KS. That is native spelled backwards _KS to view product and place an order. Evitan Couture. Feel the spirit of resilience in every stitch.
I think you start always with yourself and with what is your passion. And then you have to look for the support. So maybe the support wasn't as a parent, but when I went out, for example, like Gilda Ochoa, she said, I don't know anything about this, but she was willing to help me, right?
Yeah.
And then there was, I think, signs from the universe. So I think it's in Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, where it says like the universe conspires to help us achieve our mission. And so I do think that's true because even though I had self-doubt when I was in college, it was in a history class that I first learned about the Latino physician shortage. And so to me, that was a sign that told me that I was needed to go into the profession.
Welcome to episode 11 of season 2 of the Multiracialverse podcast. I am your host, Antonio Fernandez. And today we have an extraordinary guest, Dr. Mariela Garcia, MD. Dr. Garcia's journey is a testament to resilience, cultural pride, and the transformative power of education. Dr. Garcia grew up in Glendale, California, in a family deeply rooted in Mexican heritage. Her parents' stories of immigration and perseverance shaped her understanding of identity and the importance of community. Despite facing cultural and socioeconomic challenges, Dr. Garcia's determination led her to pursue a career in medicine driven by a desire to serve underserved communities. In this episode, Dr. Garcia shares her inspiring path to becoming a physician, including the pivotal moments that fueled her passion for healthcare. We'll explore her experiences navigating the complexities of med school, the support systems that helped her succeed, and the unique challenges faced by Latino physicians in the United States. Dr. Garcia also discusses her approach to culturally sensitive care, emphasizing the importance of trust and empathy in patient relationships. Join us as we delve into Dr. Garcia's remarkable story filled with insights on overcoming adversity, advocating for healthcare equity, and the significance of cultural representation in medicine. It's a conversation that underscores the power of perseverance and the impact of compassionate care on diverse communities. Dr. Garcia, welcome to the Multiracialverse. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, I'm excited to have you on. I can't wait for you to share about your journey and share how you became a doctor. And there's definitely a lot of wisdom and opportunity to share that with future generations of those individuals who want to become doctors. Tell me about your origin story, how your parents came to the United States, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So they each have a different story, similar probably to a lot of our people, but each a little different. My mom is the second youngest of 12 siblings, and she actually came over for work opportunities.
Yeah.
And her siblings were already here. So she actually didn't meet her older two brothers till she was like in her teens, because they left pretty early on. From Ranchito. She's from a small rancho in Jalisco, Mexico. And when she came over to the United States, she actually came and she was living with some cousins and a few of her sisters. And they had gotten her work opportunity. So she came over like on a work visa. That did expire. And, she did overextend her visa a couple times and then got kicked out and had to come back in and so forth. She actually does recall saying that there was raids sometimes at the factory where she would work. But eventually her siblings basically are the ones that helped her secure a green card.
Hmm.
And she was probably around 17, 18 when she came the very first time. And she then met my father here, and that's how they built our family. And my father's story is a bit different because my grandfather, his dad, actually came over in the 1940s over to Philadelphia to work in the railway system. They actually went into Mexico to hire them. And he was too young. He was too young at the time to actually be allowed to work, but he really wanted to because he wanted to have the opportunity to make more money.
Do you remember how old he was?
Oh, yeah. He said he wasn't old enough to, let me see. He was 16, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So what he ended up doing is he used his older brother's birth certificate to enroll, to get work. And so they had him work. He's from a small rancho in the state of Durango, Mexico.
Okay.
They're both from a rancho. We're like, not a pueblo, it's like a rancho. And so he came over initially through that program, but then went back to Mexico and married my grandmother and had 2 children. Both of them, unfortunately, died very shortly. One of them was about 3 weeks old. One of them was 3 years old when they died. And then they had my dad and a younger sister. So after he had his kids, my grandfather came back. And at that point, he came back to the United States, to different states. So he worked in Chicago, Illinois. He worked here in California, Jamestown, I believe, in Northern California, all throughout the state. And he did a lot of agricultural work and different kind of work. And then he brought my father over when my father was about 15 years old. He brought them over, my grandma, my father, and his sister, so my aunt. And they lived in Oxnard for a few months. And then they relocated to like East LA. And that was kind of their journey. That's how they came over.
Yeah.
And then I believe I had graduated high school already when both my parents became U.S. citizens.
Oh, right on.
My parents had 5 kids together. And I'm right in the middle. I have 2 older sisters and 2 younger brothers.
Right on.
And I do have another brother that my father had with another relationship. Yeah.
Did your parents end up finding work that they did kind of long term as a profession once they were more established here, or did they tend to do work different types of work?
So my mother worked in that factory when she came over up until she got married.
Okay.
And then in a very traditional way, she stayed home and she raised us, and she no longer worked. My father came over and he did a lot of different kind of work. At one point he worked for Mattel. He worked with different restaurants and different things. He worked for this gentleman in the 1960s who owned a nightclub. And when that man was ready to retire, he really liked my father's work ethic. And he told him, I would like for you to take over the business. So I'm going to sell the business to you. But my father at that time, obviously, economically, he couldn't purchase it on his own. So they actually made like a partnership. My father, my grandfather, 2 cousins and an uncle together bought the business from the gentleman. And my dad actually did finish high school here in the United States. He says he doesn't know how. He says que acabó de panzazo, and that they probably graduated him just because they wanted to get rid of him. But he did get a high school diploma, and he was kind of the head of that group that took over the nightclub business.
Yeah.
And eventually they did open a second location, and then the partnership dissolved. And my family still owns it. It's called A Mi Hacienda. It's a nightclub in the city of Pico Rivera.
That's awesome. And so your family settled and you were born in the Glendale area?
Yes. So we always kind of asked my dad why Glendale, because there's actually is it the west side and the east side of Glendale? It's kind of funny the way it is divided. But
yeah.
There's a street like Colorado And on the other side, there was a lot more Latinos growing up. And we were actually on the side of Colorado where there wasn't that many Latinos. My neighbors growing up were actually mostly Caucasian. But then as time went by, there was a lot of Armenian immigration to Glendale. So a lot of my neighbors were Armenian as well.
Did you go to school on the side where it was more white individuals?
Yeah.
And and what was that like for you? Do you remember in the beginning, was there any complications due to people being racist or prejudiced?
So interestingly enough, I was reflecting on that and thinking, in elementary school, I don't think that I had much awareness of otherness. Like, I actually had a pretty diverse group of friends. So there was Caucasians, but I remember, there was at least a few Latinas, and I had some African-American friends, and I had some Filipino friends. And so we were a very diverse group of friends in elementary school. And I never really thought about it. I never thought about the fact that we were so diverse or different. I think I started to realize it around junior high. And in junior high, like, I guess what became more apparent is just the way parents handled puberty and boys. My parents were very, very strict. And so a lot of the other girls that I hung out with had different rules. Like, we were never allowed to spend the night at anybody's house. We were not allowed to have play dates. Chores came first, no matter what, even over homework. Like, I remember we used to be like, oh, I have this assignment due. My mom would be like, tienen que lavar los trastes. And like, oh, I have this project due. Sí, pero vamos a ir con tu abuelita. And so, like, that, I think in junior high is kind of when it became more apparent. And I did realize that I started to gravitate more towards my Latino peers. So in junior high and high school, my group of close friends actually became a lot less diverse.
Oh, interesting. And how do you think it affected that strictness, the cultural strictness, affected your desire to either want to break away from it, or were you more did you conform to that versus like fighting, hey, I this is just way too strict and I need to be me,
Yeah. So I do have two older sisters.
Okay.
And so the three of us were very close growing up, and we found ways around the rules. So, we had strict curfews and like no dating policies and so forth. But especially my older sister and I, the middle sister, not as much, but my older sister and I, we found ways to circumvent the rules, and we covered up for each other as much as we could. At the time, we thought all our parents' rules were pretty unfair and too strict. I've come to appreciate them as I'm a mother now, right?
Yeah.
But I do reflect on the fact that a lot of my upbringing was fear-based. So I was afraid of my parents. My husband argues that I'm still scared of them. Sometimes he'll call and he'll be like, why are you still scared of your parents? But we were raised very strictly. My mom could look at us and just one look would tell us, like, shut up and behave, So with regards to that, I do raise my children differently. I have two kids, a boy and a girl. And we have very, very open communication. So in my house growing up, it was, because you live in my house, these are the rules, period. And I always try to explain to my children the reason for the rules.
And so with you and your siblings, do you feel as a middle child, were you a cutoff to where the children after you started getting a break from the cultural strictness? Or because I know that happens in families, like usually the first two children or the first child will get it, and then the parents will start to, the American culture starts to impact that, amongst other things, starts to impact their parenting, and they're like, okay, you know what, we have to be, we have to give a little bit,
Yeah, there's actually a lot of factors that went into the fact that I think that my sisters and I had a different set of parents than my brothers did. One of them is gender, right? So the way they raised their three girls is different than they raised the two boys. Because, and again, it's multifactorial, so I can't fully blame it just on gender, because as you just mentioned, the boys are younger. So the oldest boy that's closest to my age, he's 6 years younger than me.
Okay.
And so, he had three older sisters, and I include myself in the fact that we catered to him. We catered to the boys, right? It was like, primero se les sirve a los muchachos, a los niños, and then the women get to eat. Growing up, like very, very early on, I can't remember exactly what age, maybe 5 or 6 years old, I was already in charge of like washing the dishes. Like we had set chores that the girls had to do, right?
Yeah.
The dishes, the laundry, the sweeping, the restrooms. And the boys didn't have those set assignments. And so, again, it's a little hard to know. Was it just because they were boys and we were girls and we were expected to do most of the housework? Or was it because they were younger? And at that point, my parents kind of were like, well, the American way is not as strict as it was in the rancho. I'm not sure. But I can tell you that we all agree that the parents that the girls got versus the parents the younger boys got are a different set of parents.
And I wanted to jump ahead and ask you, how that differs now for you raising, do you have both types? Do you have both gender children, a daughter and a son? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I got an older boy and a younger girl.
And when you maybe parent them, and you were around or are around your own parents, do they ever say anything about the way that you parent versus the way that you were parented?
Yes. So interestingly enough, though, I had to check myself multiple times.
Yes.
There were times where I found myself with something very simple as like making 2 huevos estrellados, and like I would give my son the prettier egg. I caught myself, right? And I was like, why am I choosing the more aesthetic looking plate for my son versus my daughter? So I started doing it like, I guess in my head, taking turns. Like if an egg broke, and I would take turns giving the uglier egg to the other child, I also think for a time I overcorrected, and I was constantly going on and on about how wonderful women are and how great women are and how women run the world, and without women, all this, right? And I started to feel worried that I would make my son feel less than, right?
Yeah.
Even though I talked it over with like, friends, and they were like, well, no, don't worry. The world is still like a man's world. So I don't think you're going to feel too shunned or shamed. But I think we found a good balance where we praise their efforts, and their empathy and their kindness. And we really stay away from gender-focused roles, right?
That's great.
So whatever activities the kids wanted to do, they were allowed to do. We were always very, we wanted always for them to feel like they could do whatever they wanted without it having to be like a strict gender conforming role, right? So both my kids were in Scouts for a while, and the program itself is no longer called Boy Scouts. It's just called Scouts of America. So both my kids were in that. My son did jiu-jitsu because he wanted to. My daughter did dance because she wanted to, not because we told them to. And they, we offered them both the option of doing the other activity. And they just didn't want to. But in terms of my parents just, they often warn me not to spoil them too much. So when they would hear me explaining to them why I'm doing something, or, doing something because my child wants to do it, they would warn me about not spoiling them too much. But I would, then explain to my parents that I didn't think I was spoiling them by listening to them and understanding what their needs were and trying to accommodate them. Obviously, if they were within our means and within our abilities, right?
Yeah, for sure.
A big thing for my mom was que los iba a hacer presumidos, because I was constantly telling my kids how beautiful I think they are. But growing up for me, like both my parents, I think it's how they were brought up. They are not complimentary and not affectionate. So for me, it was really, really important that my kids hear from me that I love them and that I think they're beautiful. I would always put a disclaimer and I would say, you know what? I fully accept that I'm your mother. And for all I know, you're actually ugly, but when I look at
you, it's beautiful. And so what was, kind of going back to your own childhood, what was it like as far as, because there's a lot of that, I guess we'd call it kind of stereotypical, but I think it's not stereotypical in a bad sense of the idea that being children of immigrants, I'm like second generation, like were your parents adamant about education? Yeah, let's start with that, and then I have a follow-up for that. Yeah.
So my father was.
Yeah.
And my mother was supportive of what he wanted us to do, but my mother only has a second grade education, and so I don't think she understood what it entailed to get an education in this country and to study. So like I mentioned before, we would sometimes say we have homework and she would say, I don't care. You have to get your chores done first. So like homework was not a priority for her. And she was a stay-at-home parent, and she was the parent who was with us. And she was the parent who would go to school meetings and back to school night and so forth, even though she did not speak English. So she would often go because, we had to sign in and it was a requirement. But I don't know that she fully understood everything that was going on. Oftentimes she said she wouldn't, and sometimes she would be bored. And when she was pregnant with my little brother, she would fall asleep, But she tried. She just didn't really have an understanding of what it entailed. And so neither parent was ever able to help us with our homework, right? We kind of did our homework independently. My father always thought education was very important. He thought it was important because he didn't want us to work for anybody else. So he wanted us to figure out a way to, ideally, because he became self-employed, right? He was able to run the business. He wanted us to be self-employed. So he did always emphasize education. And he showed up for things like graduation and things like that. But he wasn't able, obviously, to give us any guidance, when it came to like, take these classes or do that or do this. Yeah.
And did you have an idea of what you might want to be, what you would aspire to be, when you were a teen or in high school?
So I think my story is kind of interesting because in elementary school, what I recall wanting to be was like, anything that had to do with telenovelas. I loved telenovelas. So I wanted to be like a makeup artist or a hairdresser or something, that maybe one day I would work with las estrellas de las telenovelas. But, and then at one point I wanted to be like a marine biologist because we had gone to SeaWorld and I had loved the animals. However, the reason I'm saying it's an interesting story is everybody else recalls that when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and we would visit my great grandmother in Durango, they recall that I would take her medication, that I would always ask, can I please take her pills? And that I would take her pills, and that they would joke that I was going to be, I don't remember if they said enfermera, probably they said enfermera, but that there was going to be an enfermera one day, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't fully in my awareness, again, throughout elementary school. It was more in high school, honestly, where, again, reflecting a little bit on just how traditional my parents' roles were and how, to me, my mom's independence was limited and how she was financially tied to my father. I didn't want that for myself.
Yeah.
So I do recall having a moment where I actually said to myself that I did not want to be financially dependent on anybody else. And I wanted to find a job that would make me financially independent. And so I kind of thought awesome. Like, what am I good at? And I was good at math and science. And what are the jobs that are good at math and science and that pay well, right?
Yeah.
So I had actually contemplated being an eye doctor because I've worn glasses since I was in the second grade. I contemplated being a dentist or orthodontist because I wore braces when I was like in 12 or 13 years old. So my dad was like, no, don't be a dentist. You're going to be smelling stinky mouths all day, right? And then at some point, I actually realized that an optometrist is not a doctor per se, right?
Yeah.
So they don't go to medical school.
Yeah.
And so that's when I kind of became interested in what is medicine about. I didn't know anybody who was a doctor. So I actually volunteered when I was in high school. I volunteered at the local hospital near my house. And my job as a high school volunteer was just to translate for patients, transport them sometimes. And during that period, patients just expressed such an enormous gratitude simply for being able to communicate with me and for me being able to communicate with them.
Yeah.
It just felt really rewarding.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of was like, oh, this is what I want to do. You know, I had no clue what it entailed. I didn't know that it was very competitive. I didn't know that it was hard to achieve. None of that. I had no awareness. I just thought, okay, I think I should be a doctor because.
Well, what kind of student were you, though? I mean, were you, you said you were good at math and science. Obviously, there's such a big emphasis put on women in STEM now that probably when you were growing up wasn't as, the light wasn't shining as much on that for women in STEM subjects. What kind of student were you, and why do you think you were drawn to those subjects?
So interesting, because I think it kind of touches upon a little bit about our family dynamic and our roles.
Yeah.
So the way I saw it, again, growing up, it was mostly just the three girls, right? We were that's how we grew up. So in my eyes, my older sister was the pretty one. And my dad's side of the family always focused on how beautiful she was. My middle sister, the one that's after her, was always the funny one, the charismatic one. And my mom's side of the family was always calling her Pina Chiquita, which is my mom's name. And they were, loved being around her.
Yeah.
So I think that school luckily came pretty easy to me. Yeah. I think that I benefited from having two older sisters. And so I don't recall ever really going through that ESL phase per se. I feel like as far as I can remember, I have spoken both English and Spanish.
Wow.
As far as I can remember.
Yeah.
Because my parents spoke to me solely in Spanish. My sisters, I think, spoke to me probably almost all in English. And even from, because I did go to pre-K, so even from pre-K and kinder, I remember speaking both languages.
Wow.
So I obviously think that really helped me. I think that helped my brain development. And back then we didn't have Common Core. Back then, a lot of elementary education is facts and memorizing and times tables and definitions and so forth.
Yeah.
So my role to me became being the smart one. And so I had to hold on to that role because in my head, I wasn't going to be the pretty one or the funny one. So I had to be the smart one. And so I kind of really held on to that, and I really made that my identity. And I was a GATE student. I skipped a grade.
Wow.
I was, I took AP classes in high school because that was my identity. I was the smart one.
Wow. Amazing. That's awesome. And so as you're moving through school to high school, what is the conversation around secondary or college look like? Or did your sisters go to school before you, to college before you?
Well, a big event happened, a life-changing event happened for us, in that our grandmothers died. So
sorry, dude.
A couple months before my older sister, no, I'm sorry, what year did she graduate? No, the summer after my older sister graduated high school is when our grandmothers died. And they died within 2 weeks of each other. And we were very, very close. to our father's mother. And her death kind of impacted everybody so much that our lives just kind of changed in a way that I don't know if they would have been that way if she had still been around. But my point is, my older sister went to community college. She started enrolling in community college because I don't think we ever really talked about it in the house. I don't recall ever talking about it in the house, whether or not we were going to go to college. And so I think for her, the natural next step was to go to community college. With the loss of my grandmother, she started dating somebody and she got pregnant and she got married. My older sister. My middle sister is only about like a year and a half younger than the oldest. And so she graduated high school about 10 months after our grandmothers died. So again, I don't recall ever having the conversation about college. I think the natural next step was just, okay, she would go to community college as well. So they both went to Glendale Community College. At some point, somewhere along the line, I started trying to figure out how I was going to achieve being a doctor. And I can't at this point tell you who, but somebody suggested that going to a 4-year college was going to be the best path to get to medical school. So the only people in my family at that time who had gone to college were one of my mom's older sister's kids. So again, my mom had 11 siblings. Out of those 11 siblings, I can only think of 2 cousins that went to college. Because that aunt was married to, I think my tío is considered like a Chicano. He was born here. His parents are from Texas, but with, Mexican background. But those 2 cousins are the only 2 cousins who had gone to college. And so one of them had gone to Pomona College, which is where I ended up going. And the other one had gone to UC Berkeley. So I applied to those 2 schools because that's the only
great.
that I really knew of that my cousins had gone to. And then I applied to a bunch of other UCs, and I applied to like Occidental College and a couple other private schools. So that's kind of how that went. I can't even remember at this point who told me or how I figured out that I had to do that. I can tell you it was not my high school counselor because
I was going to ask if you had a mentor, a teacher, or somebody who,
No, my high school counselor asked me, told me, well, why don't you join the Navy? I think through the Navy you can eventually. I did mention that I wanted to be a doctor, so I think her point was that through the Navy I could also become a doctor. Which is true, and that might be the path for some people, and I think it's great. I didn't feel like it was my path or what I wanted to do. So I had to go elsewhere to find that information. There was no Google, so I honestly can't even tell you. I must have.
Being female and having those aspirations to become a doctor, how often did you face somebody, family or others saying, you're probably not going to be able to do this, or maybe you should try something else? Was that something that was common, or did you have individuals, family or other, who encouraged you?
So my immediate family was always very supportive. Again, I don't think any of us had any clue whether it was hard or not. So they kind of were like, you want to be a doctor? Again, I was the smart one, right? So for them, it was like, well, I guess if anybody's going to do it, she's going to do it. So my family was always very supportive. My siblings, my parents, they were all very, very supportive. I remember one time I was having a really hard time actually with an English paper in college. And I came home crying because I just couldn't do it. And I was like, I can't do it. And my mom was like, well, then don't do it. And I was like, no, I have to do it because I have to get a good grade in the class, because if I don't get a good grade, then I won't get into medical school. And then she was like, well, then don't go to medical school. And I'm like, no, I have to. But that was her way of being supportive. She was just like, this is making you miserable, then don't do it. But the worst, I remember this one very specific case in college, actually. I got one of my, I think it was chemistry. I got one of my chemistry reports back and I had gotten like a C or C minus on it. And a classmate looked over, and she came from a long line of physicians. Okay. So at Pomona College in Claremont, where I ended up going, there was a large pre-med group, and a great number of them came from families of physicians.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you entered with the intention to go to college, that the idea of being a doctor was like, that was your North Star.
Correct.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
So
Continue.
I entered college with the sole purpose of becoming a doctor and going to medical school.
Wow.
So when I entered college, that was the plan.
Yeah.
I still didn't know what it entailed, what I was supposed to do. And then I was in this giant lecture hall with a bunch of people who knew a lot more than I did.
Yeah.
But this young lady, she looks over at my grade and she's like, "Oh, you want to be a doctor? You really should consider doing something else." Like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest with you, that just set fire under me even more. Like, I was like, "Y esta que se cree?" You know? and I did run into her. Years later, when I was actually at UCLA School of Medicine, there was some kind of party, and I ran into her, and I was just like, "Hi."
What was the makeup of your classmates? In those classes that were geared towards pre-med.
So I gotta tell you, I'm terrible at percentages, but I can think of so the class was probably about 150 to 200 people, like the general sciences,
sure,
like biochemistry, which are like the weeder courses.
Mm-hmm.
I can count on one hand the number of Latinas in the class.
Yeah.
And total Latinas and Latinos, maybe 10. And then the rest, a whole mix, but a lot of Asian, a lot of Southeast Asian, and Caucasian mostly.
And so you're taking these classes. When did you have the awakening to, okay, this is going to be like the next level of classes, or the next set of classes that I'm going to need to get me to either pre-med or other, that you realized, oh, wait a second, this is going to be a lot of work, and you started to like map out what that work looked like?
So actually, it was freshman year. It was actually freshman year in those giant lecture halls.
Yeah.
When all of a sudden, I was like, I am not the smart one in the room. I'm like, I felt like I was dumb compared to everybody else that was there.
Sure.
My freshman year of college, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and that added another layer of things for me.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah.
And I ended up doing really, really poorly on the first couple tests in my chemistry class. And I was going to get an F. And I knew enough to know that an F was going to be bad. It was going to lower my GPA, and that was not going to be good. So I talked to somebody who actually suggested that again, I'm trying to remember who. At that point, Pomona College is very good in that it has pre-med counselors.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I talked to somebody who was able to guide me and tell me, withdraw from the class. You still have time to withdraw. Take it again over the summer and do better.
Yeah.
However, chemistry wasn't the only class I struggled in. I struggled in all the sciences. I struggled in all the classes, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It was very different than what I was used to. Again, I was used to memorization, definitions, tables, facts, and I was good at that. Pomona College is a liberal arts college. It's very, very focused on interpretation, analyzing things like that. So I looked around and I had no clue who to turn to for help. All our pre-med, the official pre-med advisors and the people who did the lectures for those big classes were white men. Mostly. Maybe a white female, but mostly white males. Older white males. And to be completely honest with you, I just did not feel comfortable approaching them and asking them for help.
Yeah.
And I think I might have tried once, but I felt uncomfortable. And so it was, I think, the end of my freshman year, or maybe the beginning of my sophomore year, when I approached two of the other Latinas that were in my big lecture halls, and I just asked them if I could study with them. And they said yes, thankfully. And I really relied on them heavily to help me study. We went through the process together. They were not pre-med. One of them was pre-vet, and the other one ended up being my best friend, my comadre now, a retinal surgeon. But at the time, she, I think, wanted to be a molecular geneticist or something like that. But the point is, we all knew we had to get good grades to get to the next level, right? I ended up getting as my advisor my sociology professor. Her name is Gilda Ochoa. And with her, I felt like I could connect. She taught a sociology class, I think Latinos in the US. And I really liked her class. And she was very approachable. And I asked her if she would be my advisor. And she was, full disclosure, she was like, I don't know anything about pre-med. But she was willing to learn with me. And so we navigated the whole thing together.
It is that where you were pursuing, that was one of the classes that you had mentioned that you were pursuing in the Chicano Studies classes?
So I took that class initially just because it interested me and it fulfilled one of the other requirements. So it was in that class that I then decided that I wanted to be a Chicano Studies major. So Pomona College did not have a Chicano Studies major at the time. They did have a Latin American Studies. They did have a Asian American Studies and some other programs. However, I had heard that other campuses like CSUN and so forth had Chicano Studies, and I was a big fan of Rodolfo Acuna and a lot of that stuff. And so to myself, I thought, well, we should have a Chicano Studies major because it is a little bit different, the Latin American Studies. We know that Latin America is so diverse, and we know that the experience of Chicanos or Mexican Americans is different than, it's similar, but not the same as a lot of other people from Latin America. And also, for me, the Chicano Studies movement and Chicano history was a little bit more about the political consciousness and the awareness and the movement for civil rights and so forth. So that to me was very interesting. So basically, we created my major, and it worked out really well because I was able to pick the classes that would fulfill the major, including some that I had already taken.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it would allow for me to still fully fulfill the pre-med requirements that I had to do. So I ended up getting a major in Chicano Studies and a minor in biology.
So you were kind of, you pioneered, it sounds like, that program. Were you an activist also? Did you take part in activism at all throughout your college years?
So I was co-chair of MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicanos y Aztlán. I was co-chair of MECHA. We participated in protests against 227, 209. Yeah, so I did pride myself in that, which actually is why I recently actually sent my alma mater a letter because I really valued that freedom that I had as a student to be able to protest and speak my mind. And it worries me that students at the present time are not afforded that liberty or that safety. And so that's something that's concerning to me. So I actually wrote them a letter with regards to that.
Yeah, that's great. And I would probably say you would probably urge other individuals to write letters to their alma maters. Yeah, and that's a great idea.
Absolutely. Speak up for the students because if you can't we're all supposed to be able to express and have free speech. But if you can't do it as a student, it's really, really limits your world.
Yeah. So I wanted to roll back just a little bit to what sort of advice or wisdom would you give from your journey to other individuals, maybe first or second generation children of immigrants that might feel like that might have been or are in similar positions to what you were, where you didn't really have anything around you to guide you towards education or finding yourself. What would you say to those children about where do you start? Here's some advice on where you might start.
I think you start always with yourself and with what is your passion. And then you have to look for the support. So maybe the support wasn't as a parent, but when I went out, for example, like Gilda Ochoa, she said, I don't know anything about this, but she was willing to help me right?
Yeah.
And then there was, I think, signs from the universe. So I think it's in Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, where it says like the universe conspires to help us achieve our mission. And so I do think that's true because even though I had self-doubt when I was in college, it was in a history class that I first learned about the Latino physician shortage. And so to me, that was a sign that told me that I was needed to go into the profession. So what I would tell people is first start with yourself and find what you're interested and passionate about.
Yeah.
And then figure out a path there. And the path doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be straight. It's not always going to be full of people, pulling you along. You have to knock on doors. You have to take detours. But if you're always guided by something that you're passionate about, then I think you will find the help and look for the help. That's something that I would say. Don't ever feel that you have to do it on your own because there's no reason to. There really is no reason to. There are people who want to help, especially, I can speak specifically about medicine because it's what I'm passionate about. Yeah. In medicine, we so desperately want more physicians that we really do want to help and we want to guide in any way possible. But I think this is true of most fields. I think whatever your aspiration is, it might not be easy. You might not find out first glance, and they might not approach you and say, "Hey, do you need my help?" Yeah. But if you approach somebody and follow through with the questions, most people will want to help you. But definitely, I recommend people do something that they're very interested and passionate about because, a lot of careers are not easy, especially like you said, for those of us that are first gen. I think even nowadays we're going to struggle a little bit more given the administration's stance on DEI and different things. Yeah. So our people might struggle a little more even now. However, if you put your passion first and think about like finding your mission, I think you'll be okay.
And what did you look to for self-help or ways to come in touch with yourself internally to develop, that type of mentality? Did you use therapy in college or when you were younger, or did you were reading books about things that kind of drove you to be inspired?
So I've been in therapy now as a physician, maybe in the last 5 years. Yeah. But not as a teen or anything like that. Sure. I really, really think that what has helped me a lot is I have always very strongly identified as Mexicana. Mm-hmm. And it depends on the context, right? But like people always say like, okay, so if I'm in a room full of Caucasians or others, then I'm Latina, right? Yeah. If I'm in a room full of Latinas, then I'm Mexicana. Yeah. If I'm in a room full of Mexicanos, then I'm from Durango and Jalisco. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that depends. If I'm in an educational setting and we're talking about political movements, then I'm a Chicana. But the core is that I have a very tight connection to the Mexican culture. Yeah. And I think what I've experienced, because growing up, I grew up around people who were like cholos or who ended up not pursuing education. Some of them were victims of violence, a lot of teen pregnancies and things of that nature. But I think what made it different for me was that I had a very, very, very strong sense of self and pride in it. I don't remember ever being embarrassed of having dark hair and dark eyes. I didn't feel beautiful per se, because again, like I said, I grew up with like glasses and braces and so forth, and two older sisters who were very beautiful. So I didn't feel pretty growing up, but I felt proud of being Mexican. I felt brown pride, that was a big thing that we talked about. And I felt that.
Was that developed by your parents? Was that something that they instilled in you?
I think so. Yeah. Not so obviously, like they were like, "Oh, be proud of being Mexican," but they immersed us in it so much. So like growing up, I would spend summers in Mexico. I'd spend summers in the rancho in Durango and I got to experience the beauty of the land. And then here in the United States, my mom did like dress us up in like traditional dresses for Dia de la Independencia. And she would dress us up for Cinco de Mayo too, because it was like what the school would celebrate, even though Mexicans don't really celebrate. But she would put us, the school was going to celebrate Cinco de Mayo. She would put us in our braids with our Mexican flag colored skirts and so forth. In the house, we watched, Siempre en Domingo, Sábado Gigante. We watched telenovelas. We listened to the radio. Like I said, in my dad's business, it was all like norteño, banda music. So I grew up very immersed in the culture. And so I knew who I was, if that makes any sense. I felt a strong sense of like who I was. And I was very proud of it, because I was very proud of what my father had achieved.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Did you ever feel threatened? Meaning, like right now we've talked a little bit about, or there's been some implications, or it's been implied that with what's currently going on now, there is a threat not only to, things like diversity programs or other things, but just immigrants in general. Do you remember you feeling that growing up, or hearing your parents talking about that openly, about, oh, this is going on, we need to be careful or be mindful?
So luckily for me, I can honestly say I did not personally ever feel that fear, because my parents were both green card holders when I was growing up. And so they had legal status, I guess you could say. So they talked about how when they were younger and they first came to this country, they did experience like raids, y la migra, and so forth. Yeah. But it was never a threat to my family personally. However, I have to add, it's very important that as a physician, since that date in January, I have seen an increased rate of anxiety in my patients. I serve a predominantly Latino community, and I have patients who have expressed explicit fear for their loved ones, because they come from mixed status families, because they have a parent or relative or child who is potentially at risk.
Yeah. And what sort, are you general practice doctor?
I'm a family medicine physician.
A family medicine. Okay. And just to kind of wrap up the school thing, we'll get into it. I also want you to share too about the percentages of Latino, Hispanic doctors that there are. If I know, I mean, your story is super interesting, and we could. There's so many different ways we can go. But what was med school like for you?
So med school I was part of a program called Charles R. Drew, which is a program that is focused primarily to serve the underserved. So that group of students felt very comfortable to me. It felt like community. Most of them were like-minded and mission-driven and wanting to serve the underserved.
Yeah.
We basically, the way that works is we're a small cohort. We have 2 weeks of classes that are just kind of intro into medical school in the beginning. Then we're incorporated into UCLA proper. And in UCLA proper, it was like 150 of us in a lecture hall. And that was a much less diverse group of students. But I still gravitated towards the Latinos in the group, right? And I was co-chair of the Latino Medical Student Association. But that group of friends, so by the time I got to medical school, I had learned that I would need help to study, okay? And so there was a group of us who studied together, and we all had different learning styles. So we would take turns meeting at each other's houses, and we would write on the whiteboard, and we would do index cards and so forth. So medical school for me was actually a time of huge growth and really strong bond formation. My closest friends I made in medical school. These women helped me get through it. And I think we helped each other. Some of us struggled with testing. Some of us struggled with personal things during that time. But there's a group of us, we met when we were in medical school, and we now travel with our families together. We try to do things together. It was a time that reinforced my mission, and that just reinforced the power of community, because like I said, it was this group of people that really helped me get through it. Again, there wasn't much faculty that looked like me. I was trying to think the other day. I think I asked my classmates, did we have any faculty that were Latino? And we couldn't think of anybody. Not at UCLA proper. Maybe two of the attendings at Drew were, but they were actually mostly Black. So like, there really wasn't that mentorship for us. We didn't have it. So we turned to each other. And it was really important, though, because we got each other through it.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Did you, so you graduate, and this is where the idea of the percentage of Latino Hispanic doctors, both men and women, can you kind of share, share what that is to enlighten the audience? Yeah.
So I had mentioned it briefly that I had come across some literature back when I was in college, and it just described that there was this huge shortage of Latino physicians, that if we projected what the population would be like in 20 years, there was going to be a big discrepancy in the amount of physicians versus the patients. So I think the number back then was maybe 5%. Well, it's been over 20 years, and the number now is like 6.7, close to 7%, but still under 7%.
For both male and female combined.
Both male and female combined.
Wow.
Physicians in the United States of America identify as Latino, right?
Yeah.
The percentage of Latinas is like 2.4.
Wow.
I want to say in California, maybe it's 8% Latinos, but in California, we're talking about a population that is currently 20%. No, I'm lying. That's in the nation. The nation is 19%. The nation is 19% Latino. In California, we're close to 40% and growing, right? So the discrepancy is huge. So only about 6 to 7% of Latino and Latina physicians to a 19% population in the country, close to 40 to 50% in the state of California. Wow. And obviously it's different for different states, but I can speak to California because it's where I am. But it's just a huge gap. It's a big gap. And then people might say, well, we don't want to focus on, DEI or singling out Latino physicians and why increase only one group of physicians. That's not what it's about. It's about better patient outcomes.
Yes.
And we know that there are better patient outcomes when the patients can communicate well and clearly with their providers. And then you might say, okay, we'll have more people speak Spanish. The language is definitely important, but so is the connection. I can tell you that most of my patients who express their gratitude towards me, it's because of the connection that they feel.
Yeah. And is there anything else in that cultural representation that you could think of? Those are such important things. Is that connection? What are some other things too in that cultural representation that are important for the or are important, and that's why we need to have more of a equity distribution for Latina physicians and the population?
What are the specific factors?
Yeah.
I would say trust. You have to have trust in your physician. I can give you an example that has nothing to do with Latinos, actually.
Sure.
A good friend of the family recently had, my family, he had a heart attack. And he's an older gentleman. And he expressed how, the person who put in his stent was not of his culture. And so he's Indian. The gentleman I'm speaking of is Indian. And, there's a lot of Indian physicians. However, in the particular area where he had to have his emergency stent placed, there wasn't an Indian doctor. He expressed that he really wished he would have had an Indian doctor so he could have had all his questions answered. And so they could have answered specifically, for example, about what diet he should have now and so forth. So that's one example outside of our culture, but it applies to Latinos too. It applies to Latinos too, because the Latinos have to have that confianza in you. You have to be able to feel that if you tell your doctor, you know, fui al sobador, o me tomé un té de tal cosa, o me puse sábila, that your doctor's not going to be like, oh, you're crazy, or stop that, or whatever, that your doctor's going to understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And try to incorporate those things that you've done your whole life that you trust into the medical plan, right? What else? I mean,
and those are things that you can't teach somebody who's not from the culture, really. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, you can't.
Yeah. Which is it's unfortunate, but you just can't.
And it gets back to the fact that there are similarities. So again, I don't take care of just Mexican patients. I mean, all my patients in Central America, there are those similarities. Our culture does tend to rely on some natural things. Whether we like it or not, from other people, we are looked at as a monolith. And so we're treated the same. And so the approach to them should be the same, being respectful, understanding, try to clarify in language that they understand. So not speaking over their head, being empathetic about their journey, about their struggles, understanding that it's not just the disease that's the problem, but their socioeconomic status, their stress at work, possibly their immigration status, this never-ending feeling of responsibility for your children and your grandchildren. I see older patients who are of retirement age who are still not retired because they feel this strong sense of responsibility to raise their grandchildren. You know what I'm saying? So these are things that are just, and it's true for all cultures. Like if you talk about reducing Black maternal mortality, we know that if a Black woman is cared for during her pregnancy by a Black physician, she's going to have a better outcome. So it's across cultures. But obviously I'm a Latina. So my thing is I want to increase the number of Latino physicians to help my community.
No. That's awesome. I love that. You know, many first generation professionals struggle with guilt or there are things that you come up against being a doctor when you're seeing patients from our culture. And do you feel that, do you ever feel guilt or shame from breaking away from anything that might be or might is a tradition or is culturally specific, or is the idea of that you're performing medicine and taking care of your patient and making sure that they're getting that care they need, you have to find a balance for that, honoring those traditions or cultures, but also saying, hey, this is going to save your life.
Yeah. So on a personal level, my husband and I had very non-traditional roles in that for most of my kids are 16 and 14 now, but for most of their young life, my husband was a stay-at-home father, and he had the greater responsibility and burden of doing the home stuff with them. Making them lunch, which he actually still does every day. Packing them lunch, picking them up from school, taking them to activities. As much as I could, I would be present, but he had the big bulk of that. Although we both, my husband and I, agreed that was going to be the arrangement, and we both felt that we were progressive enough to handle it and that it wasn't going to affect us, that people would say things. It wasn't so much our personal attitudes about it. It was the outside voices that did make themselves present, even though we didn't want them to be. So it was a lot of the family being like, ¿y cuándo va a trabajar? ¿Y when is he going to get a job? And doesn't it bother you que te mantenga? And blah, blah, blah. And this and that. And there were times when we allowed those voices to be louder than we should have. And that's where the therapy comes in, and couples therapy and things like that. And being able to work through that stuff. But guilt, personally, a little bit, but I worked through that as well, because I was very aware that even though I wasn't in a traditional role, for my kids, I was always as present as much as possible, picking them up from school whenever I could. I now have what we call mommy daddy flex schedule, which means I get out early on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that I can pick them up from school, take them to dance class, things like that.
Oh, that's great.
we worked out a way to do that. So in my personal life, there have been moments when the voices have been louder and we've allowed them to disturb us a little bit, but it hasn't so much been guilt. And my husband and I have both been on the same page in terms of knowing that and he's a teacher, so he does very meaningful work.
Oh, that's awesome.
That both of the things that we do are so meaningful for our communities that, we can't let the outside noise do that.
Yeah.
There are times in my patient encounters where I'm definitely respectful and mindful of the fact that our culture does tend to be machista, that there are these traditional roles where the woman does not say no to certain things, that the woman puts up with so many things. And usually my approach is, I understand where you're coming from and what our culture says about these things, but it's okay for you to think about yourself first. It's okay for you to think about your health first. And if you can't see it in that way, then see it in the way that if you don't care for your health first, you cannot be there to take care of your children. You cannot be there to take care of your grandchildren. You cannot be there to make your partner to do what they need to do for their health. So that's kind of the approach that I take. I thank God, as of yet, I haven't had anybody be like, well, you don't know. Because you're a doctor in your situation.
Yeah.
I think that I tend to be an oversharer, actually. So I really connect with my patients and tell them personal stories.
That's
and I'll
great.
Tell them, I have experience with this either through something that I've lived with myself or my family or somebody. And so up to now, I think that's really helped me to connect with my patients.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what do you hope, what are some of your goals, aspirations for the work that you're doing? One question I think that's I just popped in my head was, with certain cultures, and I know my dad, he grew up in Mexico and he was very reluctant to even go get medical care. And still up until when he passed away, he was very reluctant. I don't need to go to the doctor. And I was like, he would wrap his own foot and I would be like, whoa, what is going on there? What are some of your aspirations to make healthcare more accessible, but also like more approachable and less scary for cultures like, Latinos, Latinas, and then even, those cultures that have been done wrong by the medical side of things.
Right. So, one thing is, I would like to see going forward universal healthcare. Our patients cannot have, if they don't have insurance, then they can't access a physician, right? So I would like to see everybody having healthcare. Most of the patients that I see, because I work through the Kaiser system, are insured through their employers. And so if you lose your job, you lose your insurance, right? And I think that's true for most of Americans. A chunk of my seniors obviously relies on Medicare. So protecting those programs that we have in place that are currently being threatened, and ideally expanding them. I really believe in healthcare for all. I truly do. And that's just having the insurance, right? But then that's still the barrier of the trust issue and the reluctant patient who doesn't want to go see the doctor because what's the doctor going to do for me? Or I don't want to go because the doctor's going to give me bad news, because I hear that all the time. I'm not going to go anymore because the doctor always tells me that it's my weight and I can't do anything about my weight. So I don't want to go because they're shaming me. Or I go and the doctor just wants to give me more medicine and I can't afford the medicine. These are all real barriers, right?
Yeah.
So much of the healthcare, it's a big question, because so much of the healthcare system needs to be reformed so that we have access to physicians, so we have affordable medications, and so that the physician population looks like somebody you can trust. So I would like to see in my lifetime the number of Latino physicians increase to have more parity with the communities that they serve, right? So it should reflect the communities that they serve. I would like to see in my lifetime expanded access to healthcare.
I'm with you.
I would like to see more systemic changes where junk food is not more affordable than healthy food. I would like to see our neighborhoods not have liquor stores on so many corners and fast food chains in so many corners. I would like health education campaigns where, and I've proposed this at work. I want to see campaigns where we educate our patients with regards to the common myths. So there's common myths, especially amongst Latinos. Insulin causes blindness, which is a myth. I'm not going to take metformin because metformin ruins my kidneys. We have to understand where these myths came from and then dispel them. And we have to do it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
The language. And I explain to the patients, but then a couple years later, they're back to like, pues siempre no me la tomé. And I'm like, why? And then I'm like, we talked about it. But, their neighbor told them this or whoever told them that. And so, I hope that answered the question.
No, that was great. It made me think of, I have to ask you this fun question. Are there any traditional, I would maybe say like folkloric remedies or, like little things like put your shoes on in the house tends to be one with the Hispanic culture, or you're going to get a cold, that you catch yourself saying to your kids, or that you abide by, but only maybe superstitiously, I guess.
Yeah. So teas are a big one. I'm a big believer in teas, even though I do think, the thing is, they're not studied, right? But you have anecdotal evidence and some evidence that certain teas work. So like, hierba buena para el dolor de estómago, or té de manzanilla to relax yourself a bit. So the teas, I'm a big one. Even with my patients, I'll tell them like, tomes un tecito de valeriana to sleep better or something like that. Vicks Vaporub is a big one because actually is very good for killing nail fungus. So I'll have patients do some vinegar and Vicks Vaporub. Sobarse, like with like unguento or something if you have an achy muscle. Those are big ones. Not so much of like no salgas con el pelo mojado en el frío. My mom's huge on that one, but like I let the kids slide. But I'm always willing to, like, my patients sometimes give me advice. Like if I have something going on, and then they'll be like, oh, one patient gave me garlic infused honey. They were like, oh, doctora, esta miel le va a ayudar con esa tos que trae. So she brought me like a jar of garlic. And like things that are not harmful, I'm fully on board with.
Yeah.
Because culture and confidence and everything is valuable. So if they truly believe that, putting a rebanada de cebolla on the palm of their foot, the sole of their foot is going to help them, go for it. Yeah. I do warn people heavily on buying supplements that are not studied. We unfortunately had a couple patients who had uncontrolled diabetes, kidney failure, due to a very popular supplement that's touted as natural. It's supposedly for arthritis. You read the label and it just has natural things listed. However, because it was causing all these complications, it was studied and it was found to have hidden ingredients like steroids and diclofenac. And it was causing the symptoms. So I have like signs up in my exam rooms. I'm constantly asking my patients, ¿está tomando algo que no esté recetado? And then we go through it, right? And I explain to them why it could be harmful.
And how do you become a better ally, or what are things that you do to become more culturally sensitive to those communities that you aren't as familiar with, so that if they don't have representation that they might feel more confident with, you're able to somehow bridge that gap?
Thank you for asking that question, because I can think of a very specific example.
Awesome.
I have a female from a culture that is very conservative. It's very different than mine. It's a Middle Eastern culture, and she speaks English, but I know it's not her first language. And there have been times where there's been some sensitive topics that I've offered her an interpreter, and she has declined because she feels it would be too embarrassing to share what she is sharing with me with anybody of her same culture.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So basically what I do is I reassure her that there's no judgment in my office, that she can tell me anything, that it's in confidence, that I won't be sharing it with anybody else. And I just listen intently and if there is something I don't understand, I ask her to rephrase it. I ask that if there's something she doesn't understand, that she please ask me, and I will try to rephrase it. So that's kind of how I do that. If they're older patients and they want to bring like a family member in that they're more comfortable with, we have that option. We do use interpreters, but I have to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of interpreters just because I respect them so much. But I've been in the room with my mother and a medical interpreter, and some things are missed. It's just not the same.
Yeah. Any recommendations, really quick around that, since we're on that subject of interpretation, that you can say if somebody feels uncomfortable or they think, and you also say that there is some stuff that's missed, what can individuals do to make sure they're getting the complete picture or getting the information that they need?
I mean, short of having doctors that are actually the same culture as their patient, I think having kind of both a family member in there, because also we don't want to put the burden on the family member, right?
Yeah.
There's information that like a young child is not going to want to translate for their parent, or even an adult child might not want to translate for their parent, or other family member. But I think if you have both, like an interpreter and a family member, then you're less likely to miss things.
Okay.
For those things where you don't have a doctor. So that's what I would encourage, especially, honestly, even if you speak the same language for our older patients, I always encourage a family member to be there. Because some of our older patients don't want to do things that are recommended. And so they'll go home and say, pues no me dijo nada, no me dijo nada. Like, didn't tell me to stop eating the ponchas or the cookies. It's fine. And then you have the family member come in and you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I think having a family member with especially an older patient is very important.
Yeah.
If you don't speak the same language, having an interpreter, but maybe also a family member there, would be great.
Awesome. I ask everyone, what is your recipe for world peace? We end with that easy question.
Right. I'll tell you what my hope is.
Yes.
I hope, and so far it's looking good. I hope that I raise humans that are empathetic and kind and respectful and will build their peers up and help their peers up. I do my best I recognize that I am very privileged. I'm a very privileged person. And I do my best to use my space and my place of privilege to help others. I hope that we can always look around us and want to build people up.
Awesome. You sound like an amazing doctor.
Thank you.
Your patients are very lucky to have you. I'm very lucky to be a colleague. Yeah. Thank you so much. There was so much beautiful wisdom in what you shared. And I mean, I have so many other questions, and maybe we'll have to catch up again and do a second. Maybe we can even do something a little bit more focused. Yeah. And thank you so much.
Again, thank you. Thank you for your time.
You do have social media that you like to promote, so go ahead and promote. And yeah.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah. So I am on Instagram, Doc Lettuce, because my husband's last name is Lechuga. So,
no way, it is.
Yes. So, although I am Dr. Mariela Garcia, I am married to Lechuga. So
I had a friend that used to call me Tony Lechuga. He just liked the way it sounded. I don't know where he got the.
No, it's actually my kid's last name. It's my husband's last name.
Wow.
So I go by that. So that's on Instagram and Doc Lettuce and on TikTok.
Yeah. Awesome. You have an awesome day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Huge shout out to my friend Johannes Skoda for mixing and creating the intro music, and DJ Kazam for the track.